After the massive nerfs that came along patch 4.3, hitting massive research output was something that many considered impossible. However, there is a way to hit 100,000 plus research per month and stack hundreds of repeatables before the endgame crisis even spawn. In this video, I'm going to show you the complete strategy so you can leave this tutorial knowing exactly what you need to do to replicate these numbers. And the good part is that this strategy is so flexible that you can implement with pretty much any builds. Quick report from High Command before we dive deeper. Most of you watching aren't officially enlisted yet. If this run gives you ideas for your own games, subscribe and join our Navy. This strategy revolves around the experimental sentence in Civic. It is not as strong as in 4.2, where we could get 20 million research per month and literally so many repeatables that just by opening the research technologies, the game would crash. Nowadays, you can still reliably get to the hundreds of thousands of research per month, just not in the millions department. You basically only need this Civic for it to work, but of course, some builds will synergize better than others. For this tutorial, however, I'm going to show you the foundation and give you a lot of strategies and modifiers that can help you perform even better. So starting off with how the Civic works, it will give you a special building called experimentation chambers that will provide test subjects and experiment engineer jobs. You'll also get access to a new slavery type called Orderlies, which give plus 2.5% job efficiency for both the test subjects and experiment engineers. Orderlies are also uncapped. Your limit is basically your housing. Now, the crazy part about the Civic is that experiment engineers are extremely busted. A regular researcher produces 3 of their respective type, so a physicist produces plus 3 physics research, a biologist produces plus 3 society. However, an experiment engineer produces plus 2 of each type of tech, so it's effectively producing plus 6 tech, double the amount of a regular researcher. But it doesn't stop there. What most people don't know is that you get plus 0.02 research for every point of crime, so you can double it to plus 4 of each tech if you have 100% crime on your planet. Of course, the massive tech does not come from crime alone. What makes this build go ballistic is the amount of orderlies you have. Since each orderly gives 2.5% job efficiency, if you stack 100,000 of them, you would be getting at least 2.5% job efficiency. It gets ridiculous. We also have a situation where we can gain insight into literally any technology in the game that is available through the normal tech tree, so no dark matter components or unique technologies. This situation, however, does kill some of your test subjects, but it is completely optional if you want to halt the experiments or continue with them. Halting won't slow down your job output or anything, you just won't get any of the tech insights, which is completely fine. However, as we'll see later on, there is a way to completely mitigate the test subject losses, meaning that you can have the situation going and don't lose any pops in the process, just getting free technologies. So now that we have an understanding of the basic mechanics, here's the key concept. This build scales across 3 layers: engineer output, orderly efficiency, and upkeep management. So let me walk you through each one, starting with the planet setup. First of all, the amount of experiment engineers is very limited. The experimentation chambers give only 200 jobs, and upgrading the building won't increase this number. It will only increase the amount of test subjects, which are good, but they are not nearly as efficient as experiment engineers. Therefore, in any given planet, your max amount of experiment engineers is going to be 4,000. 20 buildings. Thus, in order to get massive amount of tech, we gotta stack as many orderlies as possible in a planet filled with experiment engineers. The best worlds are the ones that have flexible districts, and the more housing the better. So Equimonopolis, Hive worlds, Machine worlds, and Ring worlds. Although Ring worlds are the least optimal ones, due to the low amount of districts and housing in comparison with the other types. Then, ideally, you want to have as many experimentation chambers as you can, filling urban zones in your main districts and research enclaves in your other ones. The urban zones are there to provide you with more housing, which you're gonna need it for the orderlies. The research ones are going to provide even more building slots for your experimentation chambers. Needless to say, get a maximized orbital ring with habitation modules to increase the amount of districts. This is the basic setup for the build. Now what you gotta do is fill this world with as many orderlies as you can. The best source is through conquest, since in most high-end planets you're going to have close to 100,000 orderlies, and that's a lot of empires that you have to conquer. In my experience, conquering the High Fallen Empire is one of the best sources of pops, since they have so many in the hundreds of thousands. However, you need to be able to assimilate pops out of a hive mind if you are an individualistic empire, otherwise they will simply die outside the collective consciousness. In the mid-game, you obviously can't conquer a fallen empire yet, so getting nearby AI empires will always be handy. Then, after you get a bunch of orderlies stacked on that planet, you want to have as much crime as you can. If you have zero crime, just unemploy your enforcers. You wait for the criminal underworld modifier to appear. This will give you more resources from your experiment engineers, which is very great. After you get this, you form a deal with the crime lords. This will stop any bad events from happening on that planet and will also give stability. The crime jobs are not an issue at all, since with that many pops, having a few criminals is of no concern. Now this is the full stacked planet, but we can maximize it a lot more, and I mean a gigantic lot more. So let's go through the 3 layers of scaling. Our orderlies, which are slaves, give more job efficiency to our experiment engineers. The engineers are going to have so much job efficiency that getting any excess job efficiency modifiers, like the research building, is going to be insignificant. The difference between plus 5000% and 5010% is marginal. However, any modifiers that increase job output or researcher output is going to exponentially increase their production, since it will multiply with the massive job efficiency. It's basically another layer of modifiers. Therefore, for your experiment engineer jobs, you want to maximize the job output and researcher job output modifiers. It's very important to note one key distinction. Researcher modifiers are applied to all researcher jobs, which include the experiment engineers. Specific modifiers, such as more physics from physicists, are applied only to the physicists, not experiment engineers. This is really important so you don't get useless modifiers. Another important layer is your orderlies. Getting output modifiers for them don't matter, as they don't produce anything, but job efficiency modifiers do, since they basically function as you having more pops working there. In this example, we have 69.9 thousand pops working as orderlies, but since we have so much job efficiency, they are equal to 254,000, so we have twice as much. There are some good sources of worker and slaves job efficiency, as we'll see later on. Grab as many as you can. Any general job efficiency modifiers are going to help as well, like the psionic building. Now talking about the third layer, the upkeep management. Our tech world here is consuming more than 8,000 consumer goods per month, but here is how to sustain it. You must have a great consumer good world, or minerals if you are just of consciousness. In this Equimonopolis, we are producing over 9,000 per month, with 50% of our workforce being automated and only 11,000 pops working as artisans. However, we can further improve this ratio. Currently it is 1:1, one consumer good, one tech world. But if we detail how we are spending our consumer goods, you'll see that more than half is being spent on test subjects, which are producing a ton of research, but much less than experiment engineers. Therefore, we can reduce the amount of them to mitigate our losses. In order to do that, you can simply downgrade the experimentation chambers building, or just choose to not upgrade it at all. In this game, I had it up upgraded because my economy was so good that I could afford to use this. I wasn't lacking consumer goods, but rather orderlies to improve my tech, and test subjects, although they are not the most optimal one, the experiment engineers are, they still produce a fantastic amount of tech. Other ways to mitigate the consumer good loss are overall researcher job upkeep reductions, so things like faith in science perk from the discovery tradition tree and the research supply depot building are essential. Now you understand how the 3 layers of this mechanic work. The experiment engineers produce massive tech, they are boosted by increased crime, number of orderlies, and overall research output modifiers. The orderlies, on the other hand, they scale with slave, worker, and general job efficiency, so stacking them is crucial. Extremely high job efficiency from the orderlies will cost thousands of consumer goods, which will need a secondary world to maintain and sources of upkeep production. Now take this plant as an example. We are producing a tremendous amount of research here. As you can see, most of it is coming from our experimental engineers, and a lot of it is coming from our test subjects as well, because we have much more amount of jobs from test subjects than experiment engineers. However, what you're gonna do now is you're gonna deprioritize all of our telepaths just so we get 100% crime, and now we went from producing 60,000 to produce, what is this, around 90,000 research, 121,000 tech per month, just because we got more crime, and the bulk of our research is coming mostly from experiment engineers, as the test subjects, they don't get modifiers when we increase the crime. This is what it looks like in practice, but we are not done yet. I know that you guys want to maximize this to the last bit, so I'm going to show you the best leaders and tricks in order to make this build even stronger than it already looks. First, your governor. This is one of the most important pieces of your scaling. If you already have massive amount of orderly job efficiency, like more than 150%, go with the scientist governor. If you don't have many sources of orderly job efficiency yet, go with the commander. The reasoning is marginal gains. Commanders, they give a lot of orderly job efficiency, scientists massively buff the experiment engineer output. So if you don't have a lot of orderly job efficiency, commanders are more beneficial. The scientist governor, you want the following traits: collaborator 3, any of the focus level 2, analyst veteran class, maximum level possible, and a destiny trait that can boost orderly's efficiency. In this game I have Shroud Preacher, since all my orderlies are psionics, and thus they benefit from the plus 25% job efficiency modifier. You could go with Robot Lord if you have a lot of robotic species as well. For the commander governor, you want the following traits: Iron Fist 2, Ruthless Developer Destiny trait, and maximum level possible. This option is best if you don't have many sources of slave and worker job efficiency, as this commander will give so much orderly's job efficiency that it will scale very hard. A fun interaction is that the commander class gives job efficiency for both workers and slaves, so at level 10 you are getting plus 20% slaves and plus 20% workers job efficiency for a total of plus 40%. With the traits you get plus 60% slave job efficiency, so in total this single governor will get you plus 100% orderly's job efficiency. It's really good, but not so easy to get. Second, some worker and slave job efficiency modifiers for you. Orbital Slave Processing Hub. It's on the orbital ring, so it's basically free building and gives plus 10% slave job efficiency. The Domination Tradition tree gets you plus 10% slave job efficiency, an edict that gives plus 10% worker and slave job efficiency for a total of plus 30% for your orderlies, and also an agenda that gives plus 5% slave job efficiency and plus 15% resources from jobs, which buffs your experiment engineers. It's literally the best tradition for this build. The authoritarian ethics and strong and very strong species traits also is gonna increase our worker job efficiency. Third, if you can get a counselor with an effective level of at least 18 and the experimentation overseer counselor position, you can completely negate the loss of test subjects, getting giving you basically free tech output at zero cost from the situation. I have made a guide on how to get Counselor skill level to the maximum, so getting 18 should be achievable in a lot of your games. I will be leaving the link in the description if you want to check it out. So, by putting all these strategies in practice, you can see how achievable 100,000 tech per month is. Of course, it isn't nearly as easy as in older iterations of the game, but it's still doable. I achieved it without maximizing it to the maximum. In this run I had many different goals, so I'm sure you guys can outperform by a large margin. And that's it for today's video, everyone. If this guide helped you out, leave a like because it also helps me out a lot. And as always, Commanders, I'll see you guys next time.